Good.
We are good.
All right. Afternoon, everybody. Everybody on the East Coast and everybody that's not on the East Coast, good morning. So I wanted to thank you all for coming here. This is our session 2, the Reimagine Productivity. I'm largely going to be speaking today. Todd is actually turning the reins over to me. We'll be putting these out about once a month or so. We'll dive into that later on. But last week, 2 weeks ago, I'm sorry, was session 1. It was largely about security and the Copilot in general. This is tailored towards a first-time Copilot user. So today we're going to talk about the reimagined productivity side of it. So with that, Todd Knapp, who generally puts these on, he's our CEO. He's not going to be here today. He may jump into next week's, so session 3, but largely I'm going to be running them through the end of the year. And who am I? So I know some of you, but some of you that I don't know. I'm Jay Longley. I'm a senior consultant. I've been in technology for 28 years now. So actually, August I hit 28 years. I spent more than half my career as a CEO. So I've owned a variety of technical companies, and worked in this space as a consultant for many years. About 6.5 years ago, I sold my company and I stepped over to Envision. Now I get to focus on the really fun stuff. So I get to focus on architecting solutions, taking deep dives into cybersecurity. In the past 3 to 4 years, I've had a heavy emphasis and focus on machine learning and generative AI, and then the next versions of AI. So largely, when it comes to the solution architects and Envision, I'll be your person to talk to. Again, wear many hats, but nice to see you all and connect with you. So a little bit of housekeeping at first. Don't be shy. Ask questions. I don't want to talk at you. We make this a Teams meeting so that way we can have the interactiveness of it. If we wanted to do a webinar session, we would just, create a GoToWebinar, GoToMeeting or something like that. You would be attendees, in listen only mode. I don't want that. I want to interactive. I want you to ask me questions. I want to have a deeper dive and better discussions on this. And then the next months and subsequent months, we'll be able to tailor this more towards the questions that you ask too. So that way everybody gets a value that they're really after, from these. With this, don't be shy. We have, Brandy, Matt, Tim, they're on my team. They certainly will be monitoring the chat. If you want to raise a hand, you certainly can raise a hand. They have the virtual hand that you can raise. They'll be monitoring that, looking at that. If you have a question, I'm in the middle of talking about something, feel free to interrupt me. Again, I want to make this interactive and conversational more than me talking at you. So if you're a little bit on the shy side, you can always connect with us afterwards. But feel free to make this as engaging as you want. I want everybody to come away with something from it. So disclaimer, this is a live demo, right? This is Envision's live environment. So there's things that can go wrong in the live environment. You may see some things that you shouldn't be seeing. So you'll see that I'm actually off screen pulling up the demos, pulling up some things, and then I'll just be pulling them onto screen. Just because, again, it is a live environment, I want to make sure that the information we show you is relevant and nothing sensitive leaks out. I don't think it should, but there's always a chance, right? The other thing to note, too, is that because it is a live environment and a live demo, issues can happen. Microsoft suffered a denial of service attack recently, right? Internet connections go in and out, up and down. So in the event that happens, we'll just roll with it, and we'll skip forward. But again, live environment, so that's our disclaimer. So our agenda for today, we're going to talk about personalizing Copilot for your organization. What does that mean? So Copilot itself, out of the box, is just like ChatGPT, right? But Copilot itself can be so much more powerful because there's a lot more power in the Microsoft 365 platform. So today we're going to take a little more of a deeper dive into that as to where the power in the platform largely is. We'll talk about how to add in other types of data that doesn't sit in your Microsoft 365 environment, and the integration of the data that's not in your 365 environment that's relevant to your company. And the mixture of that plus prompt engineering gives you a very powerful system as opposed to working with a Claude or a GPT or something like that. So we'll take a little bit of a dive into that. There are things called custom copilots. We'll take a bit of a dive into that as well. Custom copilots are a way to extend functionality, but tailor it to the responses you want to deliver to the end users and the people that are prompting it. And then we'll talk about the role of the Power Platform overall with innovation. So next week's session 3, we will, give me one second. So next week we'll talk about, building the adoption plan. What that means is largely once you get the foundational elements with Microsoft 365, with your security, and the integration with Copilot, you have things like retention labels and you have sensitivity labels for your documents and your sensitive data, and also for your chats. So you're identifying sensitive types of information, not just PCI, HIPAA, things like that, but you're also identifying contracts and discriminatory languages and things like that. Once you have those foundational elements, we want to have you understand that to adopt Copilot, you're going to need to interact with AI and learn how to interact with AI just as AI is learning to interact with you. So there's that back and forth, right? So that's how you're going to be training your users, and that's how you're going to be adjusting your language, which we call prompting. And then also you're going to learn how to name your data properly and tag your data properly too. So again, all ways that you're going to have to interact with artificial intelligence, so artificial intelligence can give you the beneficial data that you're looking for. We're going to hold these 3 sessions every month for the rest of the year. So next week is session 3, then we'll start this over again in September. Session 1, 45 minutes, session 2, 45 minutes, 3, roughly on a weekly basis. Sometimes we may have to shift for schedules or vacations. But again, this is number 2 and out of 3. So let's take a few minutes and talk about Copilot. Again, please feel free to stop me and ask me questions. I'll show you the demos in a minute, but I just want to get some foundational knowledge out there. And I know we looked at this last week, but just to touch on the subject again. Here we have, in our Microsoft 365 apps, those are the applications that you're going to be interacting with. Your Word document, your PowerPoint, your Excel, Outlook. When you ask it a question, when you prompt it, when you give it a question, it's going to go over to your Microsoft graph. Largely, this is Copilot symbols, largely the graph, right? It's going to connect into your system. It's going to get all the different context and data and all of the information that you have, right? And what it does is it takes that information and it drafts you a response. So if you ask it a question, it will gather all of the information for the entirety of the corporation, for the entirety of the company, and all the other data sources that you've asked it to look at, and then it will draft a response. Now, all of that data, if it's not properly secured, can give your end users a wealth of information they shouldn't be getting. So it goes back to the Copilot engine, and it does a thing called grounding, right? It looks at who's allowed to ask these questions, what permission do they have to receive this data, and is appropriate, right? So after it goes through that grounding and ensures the permissions are set properly, according to the way that you build them within your system, then it will deliver the response back to the person. It does this within fractions of seconds, right? When you prompt Copilot a question, you're getting responses near instantly, and it's doing all of that. We'll dive into the graph in a little bit. I think we should spend a few minutes on that, and then also what the semantic indexes. But just at a high level, that's largely how Copilot is gathering the information from your question, crafting the response, ensuring the security for that user doesn't deliver them something that they shouldn't have, and then delivers the response to them. So again, foundational element is security that you have in the system. So today we're going to talk about, we focused on a couple of different areas. Today we're going to talk about the internet, and search, and index. So those are the areas we're do quite a bit of I would say demo in, because that's really how you're going to extend it. Again, out of the box, it's more like a ChatGPT, and ChatGPT is great itself, but we don't want just ChatGPT, especially in business. I want relevant information to my organization. I want to gather things that GPT just can't see. So that's our areas of focus for today. Just remember that Copilot itself is not an analytics program. Copilot gathers information and delivers you the answers. It doesn't analyze information. It's a large language model. Large language model itself is a way that, we had mentioned that you're learning to talk to AI. Large language model is a language model where AI is learning to talk to you, right? So you can have conversations back and forth. So with that, is any questions? No? All right. So let's dive into some demos. All right, so today we're going to start in admin.microsoft.com. And I've got a couple of different sessions open. You can see I'm logged in as an admin here. My general user permissions don't allow me to have access to this portal, which is fine. There's a separation of duties. This is my normal login. This is my administrator login. Only use your administrator login where you need it to keep security, pretty locked down. So within admin.microsoft.com, we have Copilot. So it's a little sidebar on right here, right? And within Copilot itself, you have a lot of abilities, right? And this is the fun part of having a live demo system. So let me just reset this one. Okay, here we go. So you have a lot of abilities within this. So Copilot itself from admin.microsoft.com, you have the overview, right? And the overview gives you an overview of adoption within the organization. Now in Envision, we have 56 licenses enabled. So you'll see 56 licensed users over here. You may have 10 in your organization. You may have, 300. We work with some very large school districts that have tens of thousands of employees, but only have 20 people enabled. So you'll see the adoption. You'll see licensed users, and you'll also see the adoption, how many people are actually interacting with it, right? And it gives you a bit of information. This specifically is for Copilot. How many people are interacting with Copilot through Teams is 21, right? Through chat itself, 15. Through Word, through Outlook. So it gives you specific adoption rates for that application and who's interacting with it. So it's not the full snapshot. Let's take a look at settings. Now, there's a lot of abilities within Copilot that are paid for and a lot that are free. If you look at Copilot in Bing and Edge and Windows, that's your free versions of Copilot. You can interact with Copilot largely if you pull up your copilot.microsoft.com address, you log in as a business user. Now you can interact with that and you don't need that $30 per month license. You have a Copilot version that has it. Microsoft's new Surface devices also have a Copilot enabled chip in the system. So you can interact with it on the Windows side as well. Bing, we're all familiar with Bing and searching, and we'll see a little bit of that later on. But if you want improved responses, within your organization, and you don't want it to just have information relevant to your internal data, now you want to extend it, right? And how do you do that? There's only one single check mark you have to do. It's right here. Improved responses with web content in Copilot for Microsoft 365. Now, what does that do? Very simply, if you want Copilot to look at your internal system, it can with that license, the Copilot Pro license. If you want it to start looking at your information and also pull information from the web, similar to what ChatGPT does, just check that off. And now it can improve the responses it's delivering to you using content on the web. So if you're looking for the most relevant, up-to-date, or spot checking things, or making sure that the data is keeping you honest, that's all you have to do. Now Copilot will have access to the web. We'll take a look at admin.microsoft.com. So we're going to stay in this portal. And let's take a look at our search and intelligence. So all admin centers and search and intelligence. Now, search and intelligence, we just mentioned a minute ago, search and index, that's largely what we're going to be talking about here. The internet, now you know how to get Copilot to the internet. Search and index. Search intelligence itself is where the power comes from. So I'm going to dive into configurations, and there's not very much that we've got configured here. If you want to activate through your organization to have Copilot within Bing, with Bing extensions, with some shortcuts and insights, this is largely where you do it. There's not a whole lot of excitement here, but it extends the functionality. What I think really the best parts of Copilot are on things like the answers. And I don't have the answers set up because I don't necessarily need them here, but I want to discuss this for a few minutes. Now we have acronyms within our organization. We have a security division. Our security division likes to do what we call CNSA, a comprehensive network security assessment. The acronym is CNSA. Outside of Envision, it's not a common term. So if you hear somebody say, "Oh, I need to get a CNSA for my organization," you really just don't have that information, right? If I prompt Copilot also, and it's not finding CNSA internal in my data set, and it looks out in the web, and it may find something else not relevant to my organization that has a different meaning for CNSA, and I don't want that integrated in my results, this is where I would define it. I can add an acronym, and I can define the acronym as a CNSA. It's a comprehensive network security assessment. And then within here, I can say, in a nutshell, at a high level, it's an internal and external penetration test vetted by top tier security professionals, right? And if I wanted to point it at a specific file or a web page, now here's how I can do it. So it'll give me tailored results on acronyms that are relevant to my organization. The Q&A section helps with specific topics and specific answers, right? So say if my human resource department gets very pointed questions all the time, very common questions. What days do we have off per year? What are the observed federal holidays? What are the observed state holidays? Some we observe, some we don't. If I direct my employees internally to start asking Copilot for this information, I don't want it to go out and find things that aren't relevant to there. I can have a specific question and I can deliver a specific answer, right? This information may not be in the employee handbook, right? Maybe it's changed every year. Sometimes it's, and I don't know, we'll say whatever holiday, Victory Day, it could be on this day and then it's on a different day. And some years we don't observe it. Some years it might be a floating holiday. We can largely define those pointed answers during, in this area. You have a question? Any questions? No? All right, topics itself. So if anybody uses Viva, Viva itself is an entire platform you can integrate within the organization. There's some adoption, there's some not, and we largely see it with some intranet sites are being replaced with Viva or employee engagement and things like that. Now, if I wanted Copilot itself to exclude a certain topic, now I can go in here, and that's where I can exclude the different topics from Viva and other parts of the organization. So it has the ability to take the wealth of information that my organization has. Now it can start excluding things. If I don't want those answers to be delivered to Copilot, on a large scale, there you go. What really is, I think, the most impressive part of Copilot, though, is how you add in the different data sources. And we may have touched on this a little bit last time, but data sources themselves prove very, very valuable, right? So my organization, we have Microsoft 365, obviously. The data itself, we don't have any file servers, but the data itself for our organization sits in a couple of different places. It sits in our Microsoft 365 environment, in our OneDrives, in our email boxes, in our Teams chats, in our SharePoint libraries. But we also have Salesforce as a source of truth, right? Salesforce has a lot of our customer data there. It has the orders that we're putting forth. It has all the relevant information to the projects that are going on. And Salesforce itself can be very expensive to license for the entirety of the company. So the entirety of the company doesn't necessarily need a Salesforce license. But if you wanted to feed them results from Salesforce data, you can create a connector. So at this point right here, if I did not have this connector, I would prompt Copilot itself. Copilot would look for my data sources, excluding Salesforce if it was not in here. It would give me everything that it found. But because I've added the connector, not only will it give me results that's specific to Envision in our Microsoft 365 environment, now I can extend it, and now it will start looking at Salesforce also. It looks at our customers. It looks at the projects, the orders. It looks at, the histories of the organizations and contacts and their locations, and everything that Salesforce largely does is set in here. Now, organizations have a lot of different silos and a lot of different places that if you had Copilot out of the box, would not deliver answers on those. Right in here in search and intelligence, that's how you're going to extend it. Another beneficial part of it is this Salesforce connector requires one service account and one license. So now, in order for me to feed the data and the results from my entire Salesforce outfit to my entire Envision employee set, I only need that one license. I don't have to buy a Salesforce license for every individual user. So that's, economy of scale there, pretty significant savings also. So within Salesforce, and again, this can be custom tailored to whatever organization. There's a lot of abilities to extend it, and we'll look at that in a minute. Within here, it gives me a lot of information, right? I can start a full crawl. It tells me if there's any errors. It gives me the last time it was updated. It was updated 9 minutes ago. So it gives me a lot of abilities. It doesn't just connect to it once, and then every time you're asking it, it queries it. It pulls the information from Salesforce into the graph database, and we'll talk about the graph in another minute or two. So with that, let's take a look at, and I'm going to pull this off screen for just a second. We have a company that we use as, I would say, kind of like a dummy account, right? It's an account that we use from time to time. It's called United Waffles, right? United Waffles is not anything particularly exciting. It's a fake system, but we use it for demo purposes. So what I'm going to do is look around my ring light. I'll pull this in here. I'll go into my Copilot itself, and then we'll put the prompt in, right? And you'll see the results above. I just ran through it also earlier. So it's going to summarize the activity from Salesforce. So it's going to reach out to my Salesforce about United Waffles, a fake company that we do work with. So about 45 minutes ago, I modified this document for this agenda, and it'll start pulling a bunch of information on it, right? I ran the same prompt a little bit earlier about summarizing the activity. Again, live environments and demos. And you'll see, not only does it give me the information about different proposals that we're looking at. Satya Gates obviously is Microsoft's CEO. He doesn't work for United Waffles, but if we wanted to look at sales orders or projects or anything that largely lives in Salesforce, not only does it tell me it, you'll see this number here too. I can actually pull up the documents. So for me, I find a lot of benefit in this because we have a lot of conversations, throughout the last 6.5 years I've worked here. Some conversations I've had in February of this past year that resurface. I need to find information, and the information could be in Teams, could be in local notepads, could be in Salesforce, it could be in my email, it could be, somewhere within the organization. Because Copilot can see all of my information for me that's relevant to me. I can give it a prompt, and I can find that information relatively quick. Not only does it tell me the results, I can actually pull up the different chats and the different areas within there. So all right, so let's talk a little bit about the graph database. So graph databases are not necessarily a new concept, but their application to businesses is growing, right? So think of a graph database as this large circle, right? And this is all of your, I'm doing this on a stand-up, your emails, your Word documents, your PDFs, all of your chats, all of the information within your Microsoft 365 environment goes into this graph. This graph itself is a knowledge graph, right? It knows you, it knows how you interact, it knows how you write things because it has the ability to see all the stuff through the platform, right? And it's great because when you ask it things, it can give you information relevant to your company. The way that it does that is it has something called the semantic index. The semantic index looks at all of this information, right? And understands it. The reason it looks at it, it looks for two things. It looks for the content and it looks for the context, right? And the reason it looks for both the content and the context It looks at the data surrounding the word or the information itself. For example, the semantic index may log bank as a word. Again, apologies about the way I'm writing because I'm writing standing up, right, against my monitor screen. So the semantic index may have the word bank in there, right? But bank can mean many things. It can mean a financial institution. It can mean a river bank. It can mean many things. And a lot of English words have more than one meaning, right? So if I want to ask a question, when was the last deposit at my bank? And rather than writing it out, it'll take quite a while. When was the last deposit at my bank? It's looking at the information surrounding the word bank, and now it knows it's a financial institution. So it's going to grab the information relevant to it. And then it's going to deliver the results to me. So the semantic index is very powerful, right? Because it looks at all that information. Now, when you extend it beyond what Microsoft 365 can see, and you start integrating it with Salesforce, or with, we use a ticketing platform called ConnectWise, or if you integrate it within other SQL databases, or you connect it to your file server. You can actually connect it to your on-premise file server. It extends the abilities of Copilot itself and makes it much, much, much more powerful. It's not looking at just your relevant data in SharePoint and OneDrive. It's looking at all of the data for the organization. Any questions? No? Excellent. All right, so let's take a look back at admin.microsoft.com. And we're going to go back into the admin centers, and I'm just going to re-show you where it is, even though we're on the page, search and intelligence. The way that you extend that functionality itself is you add data sources. So you see that Salesforce is here. You add the data source. And how you do that is it comes pre-populated with several that you can select. You can have a wiki that you want, but you can connect it to your file share. We don't have an on-premise server. All of our data is cloud enabled and secured, so I don't have the ability to do a live connector here. But if you have a file server, or if you have storage, if you're using Pure Storage, or if you're using Synologies or QNAP or an EMC array, you can connect it into there, right? You can also connect it directly to certain enterprise level websites, right? And it's very powerful because you can focus the tuning of the content that you deliver to your organization through that. So one thing that's dangerous to know, though, is the file shares, right? So when you add file shares in there, say, organization has an H drive, a home drive, and you connect it to the organization's home drive. And now it looks for, Jay's information and Brandy's information and Tim's information. And 6 years ago, maybe I stored a vacation itinerary, right? And it could be Jay was going to the Bahamas with his family, and here's some sensitive information types, right? So if my permissions are not properly set up, not only will it deliver to my organization the relevant company information, AI is going to find all my information. And if it asks a question, if somebody prompted it with a question that was vague, or if my permissions weren't set, now it's delivering personal information to people that shouldn't have it, right? So the emphasis needs to be put on data security as a foundational element. And there's also, the need to clean up your data. We're going to talk about cleaning up your data more next time, but just at a high level, think of it like this. You could have multiple files that have been sitting on a file server, largely buried for years, that nobody would ever find unless they're actively looking for it. File servers get large and bloated over the last 25, 30 years. AI does a great job of surfacing that information. So just know that there's that ability, and you're going to want to put a lot of information. You're going to want to do a lot of cleanup. You're going to want to clean up old infographics. You're going to want to clean up personal tax returns. You're going to want to create a structure for Copilot that can train Copilot properly, and Copilot would deliver you the best results on that, as opposed to giving you results that are fragmented or scattered, or a variety of other things. So you understand what I'm getting at. There's also the ability, if you have an enterprise website, say if you have an internal intranet, it's only available for inside the company. You don't have it publicly facing. Copilot wouldn't know about it any other way, right? Because if you give the extension so it can search the web, not publicly facing, it's not going to find it, right? If you have it look locally at your system, it's not in your chats, your emails, your PDFs, and all that. If you want to connect an internal website, an intranet, go right in here. You can add your enterprise website. You can even add external ones, development sites, and things like that. It's another data source. So it's a quick, easy way to add in additional areas. So back in search intelligence, we'll talk about schemas. Now, schema itself is how we connect this thing to that thing, right? So in the past example, we were talking about how Copilot itself, how we connect it to Salesforce. Now, I didn't connect it to Salesforce. Within my system of my account, I didn't have the connector built out. Todd does. So during his presentation, you will see that where we map this thing in Salesforce to that thing that Copilot understands. For example, if you want to query, search, or retrieve certain information that's defined per the organization, this is where you'd set it. Like an account name within Salesforce should map to XYZ within Copilot within this other data set. That's where you're going to put it in place. Relevance tuning, what this does is once you've made those connectors from Salesforce to Copilot and to your organization, relevance tuning allows you to have the ability to weight things, WEIGHT, to give it more relevance, to give it the highest level of focus and emphasis. For example, account name within Salesforce is the most relevant and the highest level. So when Copilot is prompting information into Salesforce, it doesn't need to necessarily look at some variables that aren't relevant. For us as an organization, account name is the most relevant and the highest. So that's how we can weight it. The graph also weights it as well, but just know that you can give the highest level of priority there. There's also, we'll dive into Copilot Studio for a quick few minutes. So just bear with me. Because Copilot Studio uses my other login. All right. So Copilot Studio, where is it? So you go to Copilot Studio within Microsoft 365. This is our web address for it. You can search for Copilot Studio. You can prompt in Edge. You'll get to it pretty easily. Within Copilot Studio itself, you go into the Copilot section. You just saw it and rather it's supposed to be in home. You'll be on the home page. You'll go into the Copilot section, and you'll see some custom Copilot bots. Now, with my security, my login, these are the Copilot bots that are shared to me. So that's why we see this list. We at Envision have a multitude of bots that perform a large variety of tasks and have a lot of abilities. But for me, for demo purposes, we'll take a look at these. Copilot Studio, about 9 months ago, so in AI terms, that's an eternity ago, we were putting on a Marvel event. So we created a specific bot, custom tailored for that Marvel event. And bear with the live demo. You'll see a little bit of spinny. Hopefully we get into it. But within here, we call it Possibilibot. And if you notice, that's the Marvel symbol, right? Miss Marvel symbol. Overview itself gives a name and description of it, right? So we wanted to create one when a user signs up for the event that we have. We wanted to be able to interact with a bot. The bot could sign them up. The bot could get their information, could send them updates, could do a lot of different things. And we demoed this bot live during that presentation. Now, how do you set up this bot? Well, you have to create the bot, obviously. Then you have to add knowledge to it. Created a little bit of knowledge about the Marvels, about the information itself, about what we wanted to be relevant within this. So if somebody connects to our our website and is prompting this bot to sign them up, it's going to pull relevant information from this PDF. So we give it a source of knowledge, and then we define topics for it to interact with people on. So if you wanted to extend your 365 environment in a smaller way to external sources, this is a decent way of doing it, but you can define it, the topics, and keep the security pretty locked down. So you'll see there's a lot of different things that we had defined, we had set up for it. We build out the triggers, you'll build out the answers, you'll point it to the knowledge sources, you'll build out the responses. And this itself allows you to custom tailor the responses that you're giving to the organization. So that way you're not just saying, okay, everybody, that's not Envision. Here's just a PDF, and we want you to search through all this information, right? It makes it more custom tailored. And I think it'll make a little bit more sense in a second. So Botsy McBotface is, I didn't name it, but it's a bot that we built. Everybody we know in every organization reads the employee manual daily, right? Ours is about 80, 90 pages long. I read it on a daily basis. I'm sure you do too. And most of the answers that you will find that you find that are being, most of the questions you find that are being asked to human resource, you'd find in here. I give an earlier example about holidays that may change year over year, and you won't put those in the employee manual from 2023. I mean, maybe you do. I don't know. But if you wanted to create not necessarily a custom tailored question and answer direct set of question and answers, what you would largely do is you would build out a bot. You can upload the employee manual here. You say, this is your knowledge. Here's your topics. And then you can deliver it to your organization, right? But not only do you deliver it to your organization, you can take a look, you can integrate Power BI into there. And now you can see how many people have actually interacted with it over the last couple of months, right? And again, this is a bot for demo, so I expect nobody to have. Yeah, we did. It looks like we did a couple of times, so that's probably for the demo. But you can gauge employee adoption of these technologies, largely using these areas. So with that, we've talked about the internet and extending Copilot. We've talked about search and intelligence, search and index also, index in the graph and the semantic index and search intelligence. So we've dove into those pretty heavily, and now you can see that Copilot itself has the ability to leverage a lot more data connections. So how can Envision help, right? We have these no-cost assessments that we perform on Microsoft 365 environments. We look at the security of the environment, we look at your labeling, we look at sensitivity. You want those, regardless if you do Copilot or not, you want those sensitivity labels in place because that allows you to own your data, right? Owning your data is critical because if I have that tag of information, those sensitivity labels sit on my infrastructure and my files, I can now be confident that my data is secure because it looks at the security around that file. It looks at who's asking the questions of the file or trying to open the file or interact with it or work with it. It looks at the location of the file and it sends all that information together up to 365. And 365 says, yes, Jay Longley can open up this email from this computer from his office, right? It allows me to do that. But if this information gets out, this information is found on the dark web, and God forbid if it's sensitive information or information that can be used against an organization, without labeling, I'd be very hesitant to say that you can get the data back or encrypt it. With labeling, you own that data, right? So I'm very, very confident within the abilities of it, and that's a foundational element you need to be successful with Copilot. So we take a look at that. We take a look at the labeling. We take a look at your cloud migration and your maturation state. We look at, how would Copilot benefit your organization? And then we start building out a pilot program for the organization. So there's a lot of ways that Envision can help and a lot of ways that we can extend it. So and with that, we have our next Copilot, which is the final Copilot for this month, round 3. It'll be next Thursday at this time. During that session, we're going to talk about retention. We're going to talk about your data itself. Oftentimes organizations will, for example, for this presentation, in the past, we may have created an initial slide deck, a version 1 that goes to marketing, a version 2 that goes to engineering, and engineering says yes, and then a final version, 4 different versions, right? You can't do that with Copilot. Copilot would be trained on bad data, which is your initial, bad data that was marketing, bad data that was engineering, and then good data is your final. All those are certainly good data in it, but it's not the final version of it. So it's only partial data. Copilot would learn 75% of the wrong information as opposed to just learning that final data. The better way of doing that is actually creating just that one file, enabling versioning on it, and you use that one file and you make all the changes within there, because Copilot can look at the versioning and it can say, you started here, here's how you built it out. Now I know how we want to deliver PDFs when you prompt me. You want to create a PDF? Great. You want to use this information? Great. I'm going to deliver something relevant to your organization and develop it, very similar to the method that you do. So that's our round 3, and that'll be next week. And with that, we're almost at time. We've got a few minutes for some questions. Anybody have any thoughts, any questions?
Hey Jay, this is Giovanni with Ape. So thank you for the presentation and doing this. It's really eye-opening and helped me understand a few things. The things that jump at me around security and governance are permissions. So when you connected your CRM to Copilot, is there anything in there that allows me to say there's certain data within the CRM that should not be exposed to everyone? So while it bypass the licensing requirement for people to see the data, I don't want someone within Copilot to be able to see specific, sales information or something sensitive. How do you control that? Is that from the CRM side, or is that a Copilot feature?
So it depends on how the data was created, and depends on how it is stored, right? So for example, as I'm creating data, and if I'm properly licensed and I have sensitivity labels built in, as I'm creating data, it's identifying it as contract language, as agreements, as PCI or HIPAA or any of that. It's wrapping compliance around that. And at that point, it knows that Jay Longley is the only one that's supposed to have access to that, if that's the way we define it. So if anybody aside from me asks for it, it's looking at the security of the document before delivering it. If you have it set where it's a general tag and wide open to anybody on creation, again, I'm just giving you one example. I'm not necessarily certain on the type of CRM that you have. But if I'm creating the data and I have it set where everybody can view it and I store it on the CRM, it's not finding additional layers of security on there. And could it be delivered? Potentially. I don't know. So what I would do at that point is I would take a look at sensitivity labels around the language that's in there, how the sensitivity of the documents are put in place. And then if it's stored in your CRM in a secure manner, when the results are delivered, before integrating it larger within the organization, I would put a pilot set of users together in a couple of different layers of permissions, and build a prompt that would deliver me the results I'm looking for. If it's delivering me sensitive information to people that shouldn't have it, now I have to reassess the security in the documents that's sitting in SharePoint. Sorry, not in SharePoint, in Salesforce or whatever you're using for CRM, and then may at that point have to reassess the security. We may have to pull it down, tag them, push them back up. I don't know. It's on a case by case basis, but we can certainly look at it.
All right, thank you. And I think that's part of the problem, or the situation with Copilot, that you have to basically prep your data before you integrate Copilot within your organization. The file share component is the one that was interesting up until the fact that now we're getting exposed data from does not respect an NTFS permissions, essentially, from Copilot's perspective. So it can expose something that before it was locked down. So getting that right is important. It's interesting to me. So I want to know more about that.
Yeah. So it's good question. So the NTFS data, so if you have permission set around a user's directory itself, you're locking it at the folder level, right, on the file server. But if that data is ever copied off on a laptop, but the data is not secure, what you want is that sensitivity labeling in there, so that way it looks at the world around it. So integrating a zero trust approach, a control plane that actually works and connects to your file server, can actually reach into those, identify the data that should be tagged also, and you can start labeling it that way too. You don't have to necessarily reopen, resave, or classify it and close every document. So there's ways to scale it out pretty quickly, so you own the data and you can secure it. So there's depending on the situation, there's ways to secure it. So there is a lot of, but to your point, there's a lot of learning on how to interact and save data properly to make Copilot really beneficial. And that's naming documents and tagging documents and all of that. And we'll talk about that, next week, how the graph is largely building those connectors. So yeah, great question. Anybody else? All right, everybody, thanks for the time. I'm looking forward to connecting with you next week. If you have any questions, you can always reach out to me offline. You can call me on my cell phone. You can, email me. You can Teams me. Our Teams is wide open. I'm happy to jump on a call, take a deeper dive into situations, and that's what I do. I'm an architect, a consultant, so that's where I have my fun. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a good rest of the day. I'll see you.
Enjoy. Take care. Bye.
Take care.